Stan, listen.
Do you feel like we should? I feel like we should move the audience a little over to the middle.
Well, there's some shade.
I'll stay right where I am, but you guys move around. Hey Anthony, there's chairs over here. If you were looking for.
I have three.
Hey, good. But it just happened.
Hi, Jack. Oh, I miss you.
Good to see you.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah?
I'm gonna go get a tripod case to sit on.
Testing. That's good.
Take it off, guys.
Oh, good call.
John, are you ready with the camera? Do you need a couple minutes? Okay, hello. Welcome. I'm Dr. Bernadette Salem, and I teach film studies here at Western. I'm very honored to be here introducing our special guest, Sam Robards. You may have seen Sam in movies such as American Beauty and AI, Artificial Intelligence, as well as shows including Law and Order, Criminal Intent, West Wing, Gossip Girl, to name a few. Where are you going, Sam? Before we start, I'd like to thank Sam for being here, as well as Cindy Petito, Jack Placido, Spencer Musser, and Stephen Hughes, and Stephen Cole Hughes, Professor Stephen Cole Hughes, sorry Steve, for their help in planning this event. Can we give them a round of applause? Okay, so Sam's going to be talking to us about his experiences in the film and television industry, and then we're going to turn it over for questions and comments. So without further ado, I present to you Sam Roberts.
Okay,
Robards.
great, thanks. It was a lot of fun. See you next time. I don't actually, I suppose I should begin at the beginning. I grew up in an acting family. Both my parents were actors. My dad was Jason Robards. My mother was Lauren Bacall. I grew up sort of in that milieu in New York City, surrounded by the theater and many greats and near greats, famous people and other famous people, which was a good education in not being awed by all of that stuff. I was able to see more of the business side of it when my parents were complaining bitterly about a job they didn't get, or one they wanted, or one they thought they should have had. But then, of course, they got another job that was good. So I rather foolishly decided to join in the family business, much to their chagrin, I think. I'm kidding. And then, yeah, and I got lucky. I auditioned for a play, an off-Broadway play, and it's a category that no longer exists now, but actually I think it's a good category in Equity, which is the Theater Actors Union. It was an understudy assistant stage manager. It was both. So you got to learn the technical aspects of putting together a show, and actually I got to call a show one night, the light cues and the sound cues. And also you had to cover understudy 2 parts. So, and I also got to go on for both of those guys, because in those days, one guy he was in a movie on TV and it only showed that one night, so he left because there was no VCRs or anything, so I got to go on. That was like that's how I busted my cherry on stage. Yeah, so then I got another gig in some like limited TV show, and then I got a sort of a big movie that called Tempest that shot in, it was a month in Greece, and it was a month in Rome. And I was incredibly fortunate, and it was really weird to go from auditioning on a couch in New York City with a casting director and a director to then having to play that scene in the Mediterranean with a scuba tank on your back. It was totally bizarre. And then what was even more bizarre is when we got to Rome, we were shooting at the famous Italian studios Cinecittà, which is where all those great Italian movies were made, with all the Fellini movies and all that. And we were shooting this one scene, and I had an inordinate amount of dialogue in this one scene, and I was feeling pretty good about it. And the director, Paul Mazursky, called me over after we had finished the rehearsal, and they had to do some lighting. And he said, "Come over, I want you to meet someone." And I went over there, and he was like, "This is my friend Federico," and it was Fellini. And he was going to watch like the first take, and I immediately turned into, you guys probably might not get this reference, Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners on the $99,000 Answer. I just gobbled, I was like, I just couldn't say anything, and it was pathetic. And Paul was sweet, he was like, "Okay, cut, we're going to go again, Sam." And I was like, "Thank you." Yeah, so, and then, you know, I was very fortunate to be able to move between theater jobs and television jobs and movie jobs, and, you know, have been good in some things, have sucked in other things, and, you know, and that's part of it. Like, just, I thought I knew more than I did, and I found out I knew nothing, and still sort of know nothing, so. That's part of it, you know. There was a way, sort of years ago, to be able to make a small amount of money and still survive as an actor, say in New York City or even in Los Angeles. Now, it's virtually impossible. Now, you know, I'm not on social media, so that's a metric that's now used by producers and executives. If you have a certain amount of followers, you probably get a longer look, or maybe even get hired because you already have a built-in audience. I have a mask. That's all I have. I don't have, that's what I have here. Anyway, so that, and yeah, I mean, do you want me to, what should I talk about, like, specific things? Do you want to have questions? I'm happy to
What do you guys
bore you
want Sam
all
to talk
day.
about? Yes.
Even yes.
Can you talk about any kind of actor training that you've had? Did you go to school or undergrad, or did you study with any private teachers in New York or anything like that?
Yeah, I went to, well, I was always interested in it. And I do remember, well, this was part of my training, although it was not a formal training. I think it was my mom, it could have been my dad. They were in a show, and I used to stand backstage, because in those days the stage manager would stand backstage with a little music stand, and they would have a headset, and they would call the lighting cues and the music cues, and they would be on book in case one of the actors forgot something. And so I was back there for the show, and then the show ended, and they were getting dressed or whatever, and so I had time to kill, and they put the ghost light out there on stage, and I went out, and I don't know, I was probably like 7 or 8 or 9 or something, and at that moment I was like, okay, it's really weird, like right now I'm on this stage, totally okay for me to be on this stage, and there's no one out there. What is the difference when there are people out there and there's somebody out, like my mom or dad were up here? So that like started the sort of the little germination in my brain of like what that would be. And I was in some plays in high school, and then I went to college, and basically it was an easy A, so I took the whatever the theater course was, which still didn't prevent me from getting kicked out. But that's another story for another day. And then I studied with Uta Hagen for 3 years, and that was just, that was great. I went, because she had a very specific way of working, her technique was hers, and she really used it and knew how to use it, and it was, and I learned at that time to like take the things that worked for me, because it didn't all work. Some of it did, but like the inner objects, it seemed to get in my way a lot. But I was able to use it, and and substitution didn't really work, although that's more of a method-y thing. And so like you just sort of find those things, and I went and I sat in on a couple of classes at the Actors Studio, but I didn't find that particularly helpful because anyone there was allowed to say something to someone doing a scene who had put up a scene. And personally, some of the comments that were made were deeply personal and damaging, I think, to some young actors who might not be ready to hear it like that, you know, because people can be cruel. And there was a real hierarchy at the Actors Studio. If you were a guest member, you weren't allowed to sit with all the other members. You had to go sit in the back. So it was all I could do to not spark a fatty back there, but I didn't do that. Kidding. I mean, that was the training I got, and then mostly, I mean, you know, I was looking at this quote today that John Huston, famous director, wrote and directed Treasure of Sierra Madre and The Maltese Falcon, among many other films, and he directed this film called The Man Who Would Be King, which was with Michael Caine and Sean Connery. He wanted to do it with Humphrey Bogart and with Clark Gable, but for whatever reason they couldn't get it together. They never did it. But so they did it later in the '70s, and this piece of direction that he gave to Michael Caine was, I think the quote is, "You can speak faster, Michael. He's an honest man." That's an amazing piece of direction because at least, like, it gives you a starting point as an actor, right? You're just like, I mean, I wouldn't want to get into a discussion with John Huston about whether or not that was correct. I think his track record sort of speaks for itself, but you as an actor, then you have something to go on, you have a hook. And it may have just been something as simple as Huston going, you know what, I want this scene to go a little faster because I know where I'm going to cut, and I'm not cutting right here, I'm going to cut there. You know, that kind of thing. So, but it was also a useful piece of direction for an actor. And like, that was the real way to learn. That I learned a lot of stuff, is directors would challenge you, you know, and then sometimes they would just roast you, you know. Like I auditioned for some play, some Terrence McNally play in New York, and I went in and I was not particularly good, didn't go particularly well, and so Joey Tillinger was the director, he's a theater guy, and he was like, okay, that was not great, and I was like, okay, so like, and you know, what should I do? And he gave me some direction, so I did it again, and then I was like, was that in the ballpark? And he was like, no. So I knew I didn't get that job, and it hurt, and it sucked, but that was good. Like, he showed me enough respect to go, it's not happening now, I need to do better in the room, you know? Although now we know it doesn't really matter how well you do in the room, right? If you have 250,000 followers, you can shit the bed in the room and still get the job, you know? So, but that's the nature of, at least of this business, you know, because I think it is pretty fear-based. I think certainly in the film world, people are executives, directors, producers, everyone's afraid that they're going to make a mistake or not do the right thing or lose money or not be successful. So the decisions are made from that point of view, and I think we all know that the film business is a money-losing business. It's not a money-making business. Occasionally, you know, you get Harry Potter in the 12 movies, whatever the hell that, you know. I mean, it's like, so you may, you know, but more often than not, you know, they're like little indie jobs, like one I did called Perestroika that was just not a good movie, like, that no one saw, thank God. Dodged that bullet, but I did make my insurance, which is a consideration.
Does anyone else have a question? Yes, you in the front.
Can you talk more about different directing styles you've encountered and what you responded well to and that experience?
Yeah, I mean, like, I worked on this film called Fandango, and it was Kevin Reynolds' first directorial thing. It was actually the first movie that Amblin, Steven Spielberg's production shingle, made. And we were out in West Texas, and Kevin had a very particular way of shooting. It was very kinetic, it was very different, because, you know, I came from the school of watching my folks work where it was, you know, shoot a master, shoot a wide shot where everybody's in it, and then you go to a two shot, and then you go to a over the shoulder, and then you go to a single, and then you go to an ECU, and then, you know, whatever. It was much more laid out, and that came from the studio system when they had 18 days to make a movie. You know, it had to be pretty plotted out. I mean, Casablanca was made in 18 days. So it was. That was one of the first movies I had worked on, and that was really that took a lot of getting used to, because for him, actors just needed to do what he wanted them to do, and how you got there was unimportant. And of course, that is true, especially on stage. No one's going like, all right, let's take 5 minutes and see if it works for Sam, if he can get into this mode. They're like, all right, at this mode, you're angry, you're upset, whatever. Like, and nobody cares how you get there. Professionally, nobody gives a shit. You could be a method actor, you could be just winging it, you could, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. So, directing style is important. It's like, as long as like, I'm just trying to think like, it's like that John Huston thing. There was another film I worked on, and this English actor and I were having a hard time figuring out what this moment was and why it was funny. And the director was Lewis Gilbert, who directed lots of Bond movies and other films, an English director, and he was an old school guy. And we were like, why is this funny? And he says, it's funny because it's forbidden. And that was like, that was the key for us in that moment. So those kinds of little things that directors can give you so that you allow the actor to find a way to it. And I never understood when I was younger why we'd be rehearsing a play, and a lot of directors didn't have much to say to you in the first week or two of rehearsal. We talk about things, we do the table reads, hey, this is happening, that's happening, but the value you placed on a moment or a line, or it maybe wasn't that talked about. It was as you got into it further, and they started to hone it down, and you started to figure it out with other actors as well. And I realized later, after directing a couple of plays, yeah, you have to allow actors the room to find their way there, because more often than not, they're going to. Because my belief of the whole thing is as an actor, my job is to serve the writing, right? And that's my belief. A lot of actors I've worked with do not believe that. And I've gotten into disagreements with them because they're serving themselves. And it's like, okay, like I was in a Shaw play, 2 hours and 45 minutes we were on stage. It was brutal, brutal. You could hear people just sawing logs out there, and you're just like, I just want to get off stage and go get something to eat. And this one guy was just taking forever because he was grooving on it, and you're like, dude, come on, let's go home. Like, they're asleep. I'm almost asleep. You know, it's hard. It's like that's when you have to, and that's when you're like, okay, like I'm gonna sail my ship. I'm not gonna try and get that person back. I'm gonna serve the play. Just keep serving the play. And it's harder in films, right? Because you don't have any time, or TV, you have no time. No one's got any time. What do you get, 2-3 takes, maybe? You know, and like I worked on Casualties of War with Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox. And I had a scene with Michael J. Fox in a bar. It was a 2-page scene. Me walking into the bar, Brian De Palma was the director, 50 takes. Just me walking into the bar to sit down. I was like, okay, because I didn't know. It was my first day working. I was like, well, all right, I guess we're doing it this way. Then he does a 2-shot, 50 takes. And I said at one point, take 35 or something. I was like, Brian, is everything okay? He's like, no, it's good, just keep going. And then they go a little closer, it's 25 takes. Then they turn on Michael, 25. Then they go close on Michael, 15. They go really close, another 15. And I just knew it. They turned around, I got 3 rips at it. I knew it. I knew it, because that's how it goes. So that's why you have to be prepared. But I found out like that style of directing in which Brian De Palma said nothing to me. He was not mean, he just didn't say anything. He just was like, do it again, keep doing it. The first 10 takes, maybe you find something interesting, there's some energy there. You know, take 11 to take 42 is garbage. I mean, you're just, blah, blah, blah. You're not saying, all the words lose meaning. You don't even know what you're saying. And then all of a sudden you get to 42, 43, and it comes back in a different way. And that was on film. God knows how much money they blew on that. But that was every day. He was doing 50 takes, 25 takes. And again, if you were you were one of the guys who was not headlining, you were getting 3 rips max. But that's the game, right? And so, but by that time I had already done 150 takes, so it all sort of worked. And that I had never experienced, and I haven't experienced it since. I've been on sets where maybe you get 10 takes, but not like that.
So what else?
Yes?
Yeah.
What are some of the struggles you've gone through as an actor? Like, are there things that you encountered that you feel like you wouldn't have encountered as an actor, whereas if you had been a different profession or had gone a different path in your life?
Good question. Yeah, well, so my parents were famous, right? My mom was a big movie star in the 40s. My dad was a big theater actor. So when I started out initially, you'd come into a room and there was an expectation that you would be that good or as I don't know, whatever. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had been around it, but I didn't have enough training. I had not really been, I was just starting my studying with Uda, and college was sort of a joke, that program. Not this program, but that program. I'm just talking about that one, let's be clear.
Where'd you go? Where'd you go to college?
I went to Sarah Lawrence, but it was a joke. It was a joke. It was, but anyway, so there was a lot of expectation that I would be as good as they were, or somehow I would have the magic sauce that they had. And of course I didn't, because I'm just me. I don't know what that, And it is that thing, like once you have it helps you get your foot in the door, because people are like, oh, well maybe this guy's good. And then of course, as I say, like sometimes you go in, you knock it out of the park in an audition. And other times, not so much. And, like I read for, I think it was Scrubs in LA, and Fred Willard was in there before me. Funniest guy ever, so awesome. And they are dying in there. They are laughing so much, and you're like, I'm screwed, because they're all laughed out. It doesn't matter what you do. And also, I'm not reading for the funny part, right? So I go in, and I read, and there's not even like a little, let's help the poor failing actor along chuckle. There's like nothing. You're just getting nothing. And this casting director's mortified, because she's like, damn, I called this guy in, and he's shitting the bed right now. So like, what are we gonna do? And so it ends, and I'm like, and I don't even want to look up, but I'm like, all right, hi guys. And she's like, turns to the showrunner, she's like, do we need to see anything else? And he looks at me, he goes, no. Those things happen, and it's like, you either take those things to heart and go, oh yeah, they're right, but nobody believes in you. And I'm only speaking from this profession, I can't speak in a larger sense, but like, no, and now like they do a thing where they do self-taping, right? I just had a couple auditions last week. We're doing it on the iPhone, and you do the thing, and and they send you the pages. They're so paranoid, they don't want to send you the whole script, because then you might actually make an informed decision about your character, and we can't have that. And also you might steal the idea, like I'm not posting the idea anywhere. So you only get the scene. and you're left to try to decipher. I mean, you understand what the scene is about, but you don't know the overall and where they're going and where this character's coming from and where this character's going to, and it's decidedly not collaborative, which is antithetical because it is a collaborative profession. And so you do it, and I don't know, and I don't know the tone of it. I mean, sometimes the tone can be difficult. Is this sort of a comedy, or is this serious? And you throw a couple of different takes in there, but my dad went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where my grandfather, who was also an actor, went, and my mother. And there was an acting teacher there called Charles Jelly, and his whole thing was you never change the mood, thought, theme of a moment until the writing supports it, right? You as an actor don't do that, and you as an actor, you can't be the actor and the character at the same time. You can't be an actor like on stage going, oh, I'm on, and oh, my line's coming up, and you have to be the character. You have to be in that moment, and that's hard, especially starting out. Because it's weird. You're standing on stage and there are people looking at you. I was in a play in LA, and it was called The Talking Cure. They made a film of it called The Dangerous Method with Viggo Mortensen and Michael Fassbender and Keira Knightley. And it still was not, because it was about psychiatry, Carl Jung and Freud, and the play was called The Talking Cure, although we called it The Talking. I was on stage for 2.5 hours, never left the stage. I came out, after a quick change, there was a woman, first row, totally asleep, just gone. And I was like, wow, we've got like another hour and a half, and she's done. And then, so I'm standing, it's supposed to be this love scene with this woman, and all of a sudden I hear, I'm the audience, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? And there's a guy on the third row who's got an oxygen machine, and his O-ring had blown out. So it's the pressure, and you're like, oh God. And then the phone rings, I'm at the theater, out, then 2 people get up, bump into each other, going to go get drinks in the lobby, and I'm like, what was this, Grand Central? Where are we? What's happening? But you gotta keep going. And this whole O-ring thing kept going through the whole scene, and then the next scene I go right to my table, I'm sitting there, and there's a buddy of mine, and he's in the next scene, and he comes out, and he's got this great part, this great monologue, and he starts the monologue, and then he looks at me like, what the hell's that sound? And I'm like, welcome to my world, pal. This is it. Every night. And those are those struggles that you're maybe not great in a difficult part, in a difficult play, in the wrong town, or maybe the wrong night, or the stars are aligned, or whatever. You just gotta grind it out, man. You gotta just do it, and not, it's, because it wasn't about me, And the other thing is like the reviews. I know a lot of people live and die on reviews, and it's like that particular play, I remember somebody wrote, like, well, you needed somebody like Laurence Olivier or John Gielgud. And I was like, well, wait, I have to be better than a dead guy, right? And then my buddy was like, well, apparently not. And I was like, oh, point taken. So, you know what I mean? It's like when they tell you you're great, they're full of it. And when they tell you you're lousy, they're full of it, I think. Just can't worry about what people think about it. Just gotta be true to the script, because it is, as my dad said to me, it's, in the theater anyway, it's the author, the audience, and the actor. And that's the triangle. Without one of those things, you don't have theater. You don't even, in theory, don't even really need a director. You do. You need a set of eyes. But you can still have theater without a director. So that, you know what I mean? And so the play's the thing, right? That's.
Someone again. How about Riley?
Do you have a preference between theater and film acting?
Well, I mean, I love theater. I mean, that's the best part, because it starts and it's yours. And that's also it's also like a vertical thing, right? We're standing on stage, we're throwing these ideas up in the air, and the audience is like, oh, I like that one, oh, I don't like that one. And There's some sort of interchange, some mojo happening. Film is horizontal, right? And it's only the director sees what he wants or she wants you to see, and it's paced, like even if you're blazing through a scene, they can slow it down or pick it up or do whatever they want, cut away, or so they're two different disciplines. I love the theater, that's the best, but like I said, you gotta make insurance. I gotta try and get on some TV show. I honestly, like at this point, I'm like, I gotta make my insurance. So whatever it is. And you know, occasionally there's great stuff. You know, I mean, I thought Gossip Girl was, I did not like it. My audition was 2 lines. And I'm like, how are they even telling anything from this? I didn't even understand. And I got it, and nobody knew that it was gonna be that. But then, you know, one Friday night, we're on 5th Avenue, and I look across the street, and there's 200 kids across the street. Like, and I said to Chase Crawford, I was like, Chase, man, you better get ready for the ride. And he was like, what? And I'm like, dude, it's Friday night. They should be out clubbing, but they're here looking at you, because they sure as hell ain't looking at me. You know what I'm saying? And like, that's, and he was like, oh, and then sure enough, it blew up. But you know, and for me, that was a paycheck for me. And you know, there were a lot of times when they wanted me to show up because I wasn't a regular, I was a recurring, and I wanted more money. And they were like, well, we can only give you this. And I said, well, I'm not doing it unless, you know. And they're like, well, we got to pay the young guys. I said, yeah, you do, but you got to pay the old guys too. You don't have to, nobody's asking for 50 grand an episode. Just throw us a little something so we can wake up in the morning and go, all right, I can show up, you know? But that's, again, that's the business. And that's where advocating for yourself during the struggles, like no one is going to advocate for you. It used to be in the old days, agents would. Old-time agents, they would do it. They would advocate. They'd find ways to get you in front of people that you needed to get in front of. Help you mold your career. Like, no, you're not taking this one, but you are doing this one. You know what I mean? That's just, now it's all an email. You know, they'll send a list, they'll say, we're casting for this part, and here's 10 names. And then the producers or the casting director will go, all right, we'll look at those 2 and everybody else can go home. And that's it. And then the distributors, although film is dying now, but especially with COVID, but the distributors will be like, here's a list of 5 names, or I want 4 out of the 5 names in this movie, and then we'll distribute it. But if as a producer, if you don't get those 4 names, it's not getting distributed, and that means you cannot get the script to most of the actors, because most of the actors' agents now are gatekeepers, and unless there's a distribution deal on the end of it, they're not going to let them read the script. Because God forbid that one of their valuable properties should read a script and like it, and then it not have a distribution deal, and then they've got to do way more work, which they just will take their 10, 15%. But yeah, and I mean, they are 2 different disciplines. And I know a lot of actors who've done one or the other, but you know, yeah, it's as, you know, Steve and I were talking about, 100% of the theater actors union is out of work. No one is working. You cannot, so, I mean, it's sort of hard to be in a play. It's weird. It's like, I'm like, I don't want to go sit in a theater with somebody I don't know, next to somebody I don't know, even with a mask on, and the actors, I mean, you know. So it'll come back, but it's weird now.
Okay, Megan and then Jack.
I'm just curious what brought you to the Gunnison Valley?
So good for my career. No, actually, my ex-wife, her family had come up here, and we came up in 1984. And I got off a plane in Gunny, and I was like, oh man, this is it. And then I got up to CB, and I was like, yes. So I just worked like a dog for like 5 years, got enough money to get a little place. And then, you know, found another spot, and yeah, it's just, I love it up here. It's, and also, it's like, in those days, the Crested Butte Mountain Theater was way more active, and there was lots more shows happening, and lots more chances being taken. It's really interesting. One of the best productions I saw, Burn This, up here was up there, the Linda Jackson directed. It was just it had like a great energy to it. Like, so there was stuff happening, and I wasn't sure, like I was, then when I was like 30 or something, as I never really cared about being famous, I just want to do good work, honestly, that's really all I care about. And I was in a few plays up here, and it was really enjoyable, and there's something about community theater that is the community celebrating itself. When you see friends and family on stage, not being themselves, breaking time, going back in time, going forward in time, being something they're not. Like and the community celebrating it. There's something valuable about that, and this valley's always had it for me. Plus it's beautiful, and you can get out and ski and mountain bike, and no-brainer.
So Sam, your demeanor you're just really approachable, and you want to hear you talk. And you and I hardly know each other, but
Let's keep it that way.
Yeah. we bump into each other and we're immediately bullshitting with each other.
Yeah.
So my question, based on who you are and how you move about the world, like among us here, everyone, I think hopefully everyone is going to find themselves sometime soon on a movie set as a PA or background extra, or on Broadway or off Broadway, or even in a proper and amazing community theater setting where they're supporting tech or supporting acting or acting, right? And it will be their first or second or third time ever in the professional environment. And you must have stories and anecdotes to give this tribe here some do's and don'ts. Like what's the things they really shouldn't do early on, and some things they maybe should be sure to do early.
You should never show up to work naked, unless it's required. No. That's a good question, actually. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, I started as a PA. I actually started as, like, I was the prop guy who was moving chairs for all the actors, like, and then I was PA, and then I did special effects and second unit and all that. And basically, like, I was 16, and I just sort of kept my mouth shut and just sort of listened a lot, and I guess, a lot of actors on film sets will ignore the crew or not be good with the crew. I've been around that, and it's difficult. And then there are other actors who will just be bullshitting with the crew the whole time. Will be like, yeah, anyway, yeah, you too, and then action, and then they do it, and they can somehow do it, and you're like, I don't know how that happened. But and I think that there's traps there as well. It's just, and the funny thing is about, like, say on a film, those crews, especially professionals, they've seen good actors and bad actors. They know when something's working and when something's stinky. You can see it in their faces, and they won't say anything. I mean, when I worked on AI, the first week, no one on the crew spoke to any of the actors because they were totally professional crew. Like, you never heard anybody raise their voice. Nobody was screaming. I've been on sets where ADs are screaming, and you're like, dude, why are you screaming? We're just on a set, it's okay. But they've got a Napoleon thing, and it's got to happen. But, like, nobody screamed on that. Like, there was, like, hushed tones. But everybody knew their job. You didn't have to put a flag over there, change that light, move those cables, whatever it was. And then later on, they became a little bit more open, but always at a distance. And I think it was, I mean, obviously that was from Spielberg, whatever, that was some directive, that's the way that he works, which is awesome, but like that was a more, for lack of a better word, corporate kind of a thing. Whereas that movie Perestroika that I worked on, the director would sit in front of a 17-inch Panasonic monitor this close, and there were a couple of moments where we totally screwed up what was happening, and then he was like, all right, that's what it was. So I was in a scene with F. Murray Abram, and we're shooting, it's 2 scenes, so we shoot my side, everything my side, and then one more scene of him like making coffee, and then they're gonna rap. And I come in and I said, hey, wait a minute, we never turned the camera around on Murray. And the director's like, I know we did. And I'm like, dude, if I'm wrong, I was in Russia. I said, I'm buying everybody a vodka. Like, I'm not wrong. And the editor, who was an American guy, hadn't even caught it. He was watching on his monitor. And they looked at it. And then they were like, right, we got to shoot Murray's side. And so then just before we started, the director said to me, I suppose I should say thank you. And I was like, so are you saying thank you? Or, you don't have to, but like, you know, so it's like, they listened to me because I was the American in that movie, one of the Americans in that movie. But it's also the way that you interact with people, right? I mean, it's the golden rule. You treat people the way you want to be treated. You just like, and you know, judge not too harshly, lest ye be judged. You know what I mean? It's like, and in the theater, like, the theater's a different animal. The theater is, you know, nobody's got tons of money, unless you're on some big Broadway show. But and everyone's treated sort of the same. You're not really gonna get, someone's not really gonna look down on you because they, like the director's not really gonna give it to you because then that shows poorly on them, but also they want you to be good. Like like everybody wants everybody to be good. Film, there's just, and TV, there's just a lot more time to mess around, and there's a lot more downtime, so there's a lot more, and you know, and it's all the social media, which I don't, like, that's a whole other thing that I don't even, it's all like up there, I don't even know what's going on up there. So that, like, that's the difference.
Okay. Randy?
Yeah, I was wondering, you kind of talked about this when you answered Jack's last question, but like, do you have any advice for us as students and rising actors and rising filmmakers trying to go into the business given the pandemic and state of the world?
Good luck. No. Well, no, I mean, I think that, like, it's different now, obviously. Like, when I was growing up, also where I came from, my family, you know, television was looked down on, so you start in the theater. Start in the theater. I still believe that. I still think you start in the theater and you get your bones there and you just, because that teaches you everything you need to know, I think. It teaches you about writing, and it's a different style. It's a different style. But I was saying to Bernadette that I had seen my grandfather in a movie from the 40s. It was like a grade B noir film. And it was that kind of 40s declamatory acting of like, I told you I would be there after 5 o'clock and you were never there, but whatever that was. And then, but then my grandfather played like the detective, but he was doing modern acting, like no choice acting, like I love you, I hate you, I'm here, I'm there. Like, and it was weird to see it in that setting because there was not a lot of modern acting. You know, film, and no one's making films now. I mean, they are, if they're big tentpole. I mean, you know, how many more comic book movies do we have to see before I pull my eyes out? But, like, I think actually making your own thing on, like, your iPhone is almost the way of it, right? I mean, it's ultimately democratic in that anybody can do it, but I still believe, and you know, who knows when anyone can be in the theater again. I just think that there's something about that it's because it's not being natural, it's being real, right? Natural is comfortable. Realism is not always comfortable. And I think that learning how to do that and reading those plays and having to dig in there and play some of those parts. I mean, even though that one job I told you about where everybody was asleep in the O-Ring and the Grand Central, I was there for 2.5 hours. I learned so much about having to never leave the stage in that play. It's endless talking and no one paying attention. Like, you've got to keep lifting it. You've got to keep the energy. You've got to keep it going, because there's always one person out there. There's always one person who's like, I saw you in that thing. And you know what I mean? And hey, it could be, you name it, Martin Scorsese, whatever it is, you know, like it could be anybody, or it could be nobody. But if one person's vision of whatever has changed, if somehow you've reached that one person, it's valuable. The problem is, you never know if you have, right? Even if it's a good play. You hope somebody was awake for that moment, but they might have been asleep.
You're in the Big Sur shirt.
So kind of going off what you were just talking about, you talked about some low moments of struggle and where you kind of push through. Conversely, are there any moments that stick out to you over the course of your career, highlights, whether it was like a day on set or a rehearsal that kind of just affirmed the reason that you got into this?
Yeah, totally.
I'm sure there's many, but do you have any, like,
Well, actually not, you know, because there's only been like 2 or 3 that were peak life experiences. A lot of great jobs, no doubt. But I worked on this one movie called Mrs. Parker and the Vicious Circle, and it was, you know, many famous actors my age were in it, and it was about the Algonquin Round Table, and I played Harold Ross, who grew up in Aspen. He was born in Aspen, as it turns out, who was the founder and editor of the New Yorker magazine. And that was, and basically what it was, we had a loose outline for a script, but Alan Rudolph, who directed it, who was one of Bob Altman's ADs, who then became a director, he basically said, I want you each to do a bunch of research on your characters and then bring it in and improv it. And that was a real challenge. That was, I wasn't scared, but I was like, yeah, man, let's do this. Like, I was super psyched about that. And that was great. I had such a great time professionally, personally, but it was a peak life experience. And then the other one, I think probably certainly my big theater highlight was I worked in this play called The Man Who Had All the Luck. It was written by Arthur Miller, and it was his first play that he wrote in 1944, and it lasted for 4 performances in 1944. And they canned it, and the guy who played the part that I played was Herbert Berghoff, who was married to Uta Hagen, who I also was in a play that he directed. And so for me, that was full circle. And then Miller was there for the rehearsals, and he had directed my father in a play in 1964, the first play at Lincoln Center, which was in Anta. What the hell was the name of that play? With the play about Marilyn Monroe. I can't.
After the Fall?
After the Fall. So, and my dad had told me the story that he had been rehearsing, and Miller was there, and he was like, "Why? This whole play is about Marilyn. Like, why do you?" And Miller was like, "No, it's not about Marilyn." And Dad was like, "Well, yes, it is." And he was like, "Nope, it's not." He had this weird blind spot. So we were rehearsing the play, and there was an element on which the character I was playing was starting to take over this other character's life a little bit. And I said, so I'm just wondering, is this sort of seems like where it's going, it's not necessarily something that I can play, but it seems to be in the writing. He was like, no, it's not. Now, I wasn't going to say, I was like, okay, it's Arthur Miller, whatever. I'm like, whatever you say, pal. Like, I'm not going to say anything, but like, he had a funny blind spot about it. But then he'd come to rehearsal, and I knew all my lines, and he would come to rehearsal, and I'd be like, blah, 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 blah. I couldn't, again, like, I just panic. Because, you know, you screw up one line, it's like, he wrote it, he's gonna kill me. But he was, like, that was cool. That was super cool, because it was also, it was the first, my dad had died, so a couple years earlier, so this was the first play he had not seen me, and it was my Broadway debut, and blah, 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 blah. So it was like yeah, and that was all, and like every once in a while those things happen, but you know, then you go get to work on Twisted, ABC Family, and you're like, insurance, I love insurance, so much insurance, look at all the insurance. You know what I mean? It's like, and not to say that people weren't giving their best and doing whatever, and but that was product. I mean, that's a lot of this stuff is just product. Like Osprey is just product, and that's part of it. And that's the, like, art and commerce. They're not necessarily diametrically opposed, but they are two different things. They serve each other, right? I mean, Manet and Monet and all those guys, they needed patrons so they could eat and not just inhale turpentine their whole lives. So much turpentine.
On that note, does anyone else have a question?
All right.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank
Sam.
you guys for staying and listening.
I love that it ended on so much turpentine. That was the last thing he said.
It's my new play.
Yes, yes. Or it's our play.
That's right. So much.